I'd like to say good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
It's good to be back in the house of the Lord tonight. We're going to kind of pick up somewhere in the story where we left off, but I'm going to go to Luke tonight. We're going to go over to Luke and read just a little bit in that, and then we're going to go back over into John. And my nephew Paul sent me a picture today of a big travel bus, and asked me if I ever heard of this group. It's the Collingsworth family, and I don't know if y'all have heard of them. That they're a big gospel group, and yeah, they're on TV a lot. They're on. They're actually coming to Charleston here recently. They do a lot of singing around, and I can't remember what her name is, but Mommy Collingsworth is one wins instrumental of the year several times, and she is a fantastic piano player. And Paul was called out to come to where they were playing at tonight to tune her piano. So he was listening to them practice, and he said, "Boy, she is good." I said, "Yes, she is." But I wanted to go over into Luke chapter 23. Some of this will be just a little recap of what we studied last time, but it has a little more detail and some stuff in it that I wanted us to look at. Luke chapter 23, we're going to start in verse 39. 23 and 39. Now this was this picks up where they had just put the sign above Jesus that says that this is the King of the Jews. And this one has a little bit of detail I want to go back and pick up. It says, in one of the malefactors, which was one of the two thieves that was crucified with Jesus, that says that there was which were hanged, railed on him, saying, "If thou be Christ, save thyself and us." Now, I find it very interesting that when someone is being put to death, that they would take the time and make fun of somebody that's being crucified with them. And maybe that's because they knew within his heart that he was guilty and they wasn't. I was watching one of the reality shows here in the last few days, and somebody did something wrong on it, and they knew they was going to get in trouble, and they kind of stated that. And when they got back with the rest of the group, they kind of made fun of it and laughed it off, and they act like it was no big deal. When I think that people do that when we know we've done something wrong and we've been caught at it, so we don't make it to be such a big deal. So I think that's what this malefactor was doing. This one that was hanging with him started making fun of him. "If thou be the Christ, save yourself and us." Now, maybe it was a desperate attempt to want to be saved and come down off of that cross to have his physical life saved. But the other answered, rebuking him, saying, "Does not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation?" Do you not fear God and at least want to maybe repent or ask forgiveness of the things you've done before you die? I hear so many people talk about a deathbed confession. And here I think that's what he was trying to say. Hey, here we are in your last hour that you know you're going to be alive. Wouldn't you want to take the opportunity to maybe confess or ask forgiveness of things that you've done in your life?
Right there with the man could do it.
Yeah. Instead of making fun. Now, when you visit people in the hospital, and I know there's a lot of us in here that has, and those that are in their last hours, some of them, when you ask them if they want to make it right, some of them will, and some of them will not. They'll hang on to the very end. I've heard stories of people said, "Well, I've lived this way all my life, why change it now?" Well, when they stand before God in the time of judgment, I would hope that they would take an opportunity before they get there to ask forgiveness. But some doesn't. So here this man says, don't you fear God? And what he says, as we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing amiss. He's done nothing wrong.
He knows it, didn't
Yeah. And I think the other man probably did too. So do you want to take the opportunity to say, hey, do you want to confess of something that you've done? Then he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. Boy, wouldn't that be something that we all should ask in our last moments? Lord, remember me, Lord. Remember us. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. My goodness.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I had an idea. I talked to people, and I was telling them about Christ and telling them they need to repent and all the blessings that goes along with it. And they said, "Well, not yet." You know what I mean? I guess they just enjoying sin for too much.
Yeah, I've had people when I've talked to them, well, I've got to get a few things straightened up first. Well, that's not how it works. Or I'm too young to worry about that stuff now. No, you're not. And it always makes me wonder, just as you said, that they're comfortable in the way they're living their life. They think they're having a lot of fun. I remember thinking I was having a lot of fun. Boy, I was running around and had some good friends. And then when I got off to church and quit doing the things they did, I don't have any of them around now. And the things that I thought I was having fun in, boy, I'm having a whole lot better fun now.
It wasn't fun when you look back on it.
It wasn't fun when you look back on it. No, some of the things that happened. But the Lord said that today that thou shalt be with me in paradise. He said in about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. 3 hours, the 6th hour would be about noon to 3. It was dark. This is the middle of the day. A lot of people say, well, it might have been an eclipse. Well, an eclipse don't last for 3 hours. Something different was happening that blotted out the sun. And I think that was when, to my thinking, was the Lord had turned his back on him and because of the sin that his son had to take upon him. For the span of 3 hours, it was dark.
I think in Revelation there's going to be another time like that when the sun refuses to shine there.
And time stops and the sun will stop. Yep.
This little sample of it there.
It says, and the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. During that darkest time, the veil was rent. Now, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm remembering right, that veil that separated the holiest of holiest from the temple was made, and it was a material that was 4 inches thick, I'm thinking it was. Material that is 4 inches thick. Patsy, you think you can sew that on your sewing machine? That is some pretty thick material. And it may be, that's what I'm trying to remember. It was pretty thick. But here it says that veil that between the two was rent from top to bottom. Folks, it would take a lot to rip that. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he saith, Father, into thine hands I commit my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. And it says, now when the centurion saw that, saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, certainly this was a righteous man. The centurion, the one that nailed him to the cross, the one that they said that was parted his garments and cast lots for his outer cloak. Those that was around him, one of them, the centurion, he was probably the leader of them. How many people do you think that they had crucified? How many had they done? Now, the bodies of those that was crucified, it was pretty typical for them when they were dead to take them off of the cross and go to the backside of the mount and throw them over the hill, where the dogs and the buzzards would come and eat the flesh thereof. How many people do you think that he had done that to? But there was something different about this one. It hadn't been dark for 3 hours when they did the others. They said that there was a mighty earthquake that rent the veil. Do you think that there was an earthquake when they did the others? I don't think there was either. And here, when that happened, that centurion, certainly this was a righteous man. And it says, and all the people that had come together to the sight, beholding the things which were done, smote their breast and returned. Smote their breast, they hit their chest. That was usually a sign of great remorse or regret, because the heart was considered the soul or the spirit of the body to them. So it was there that they would hit. Do you think those that may have been mocking him and may have been making fun of him, as I said up here earlier, there was those that mocked him and made fun of him, when all of this happened, they maybe singing a different tune, as we would say?
They came to Peter right after that. Said, what must we do?
Yeah.
What can we do? What shall we do?
Yeah. Understanding this, that all of this had happened. And there was a great following of Jesus. There was a lot of them that didn't turn on him. Probably more followed him and believed him and trusted him than didn't. Certainly this was a righteous man. And all his acquaintances, and the women that followed him from Galilee stood afar off beholding these things. Isn't that something? I think it was I was here that I wanted to go over to John. Let's go over to John chapter 19. John chapter 19. Now let's go down to verse 31. John 19 and 31. It says, and the Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation, the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day. Now remember, this crucifixion happened on Friday. Saturday was their holy day. They didn't do any work or didn't do anything, so they didn't want his body to be staying up there all day. For the Sabbath was a high day. It was the Passover. This was a feast day. This was a special day. They besought Pilate that his legs would be broken, and I think we did this last time, and so that they could be taken away. And then the soldiers, and broke the legs of the first and of the other, which was crucified with him. And then they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already. They broke not his legs. But one of the soldiers which had a spear, they pierced it to his side, and wherefore come there out blood and water. And he that saw it bare record, and his record is true, and his knowledge is what he saith was true. For these things were done that the scripture could be fulfilled, a bone of him shall not be broken. And again, another scripture says, thou shalt look on whom they have pierced. And here it says, and after this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews. Now, he was a follower of Jesus. One of them, just as others that has. There's another one that's mentioned here in the next verse that was also a secret follower of Jesus. But they didn't do it because he didn't admit to it, because they were afraid of what the Jews would do, the Jewish leaders. He says he besought Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. Now, think of this. To go before Pilate and ask for a body like that meant that this Joseph was probably a very well-off person. He probably owned a lot of stuff or was very high in politics, enough that he would go. Not very many people would go before Pilate and ask such a thing because of fear of what might happen to him. So Joseph must have been a pretty well-off, pretty well-known person that goes and asks for the body. And Pilate gave him leave. In another one of the Gospels, it said that he couldn't believe that he was dead and inquired of someone to go and check and come back. And yes, he was dead. But he came therefore and took the body of Jesus. And there also was Nicodemus, which at the first came to Jesus by night, and brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about the 100-pound weight, which meant it was quite a bit, worth quite a bit, that he brought for Jesus' body before the burial. See, Jesus was raised before the women arrived to put the spices on it. So the only anointing that was done was by Nicodemus, who brought it to it. It says, then took they the body of Jesus and wrapped it in a linen clothes with the spices, as a matter of Jews is to bury. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. And in the garden, a new sepulchre, wherein was never a man yet laid. There laid they Jesus, therefore, because of the Jews' preparation day. For the sepulchre was nigh at hand. So, it doesn't say here, but in other Gospels it says that it belonged to Joseph. It was his a tomb that he had done. Now, to have a tomb like this cost a lot of money. They hewed these out of stone. It doesn't say that in this Gospel, but others it did. They hewed it out of stone. Now, I have seen some of those that they had in that time. In that area, there was those that was hewed out of a cliff, and they would cut them in, and then they would also have a stone table that they would lay the body on, and then there would be a great round stone that they would hew, and it would roll in a track that would cover the front of it. Now, in this garden here, I have seen pictures of and videos of them, that they had some in those that had a great stone in them that would lay flat, and you had to shove them out of the way, and they were actually cut with steps down into them, into a burial chamber. Some of them was in the garden that was that style. So we really don't know which one it had. Either one had a huge stone that would have to be rolled and moved because they didn't want, if there was a loved one in there, for a couple of reasons. One of them, that they didn't want anyone getting into the body or robbing the body or taking the bodies. And also, there would have been a great smell out of it for several days. So they used that to help seal those so that wouldn't happen. So I don't know which one it does. It doesn't really state here. But here we have where they laid Jesus there it says, now the first day of the week, starting in chapter 20, cometh Mary Magdalene early when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Now this gospel just says Mary Magdalene. The other one says that there was Mary, the mother of James and John, that was also with her, and other women. This one just says Mary. But this says but she come into the garden and she noticed that the stone was rolled away. Then she runneth and come to Simon Peter and to the other disciple. Now the other disciple was John, whom Jesus loved, because John always referred to him as the one that Jesus loved. Boy, that'd be a good statement to call yourself, wouldn't it, if it was true? The one that Jesus loved. And he saith unto them, they have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. Now, understanding that the Sabbath day, they wouldn't have went to visit the tomb. They wasn't allowed to move that much. That was a little far for them to walk legally on the Sabbath. Now, one of the other Gospels, I believe it's in Mark, it says that the religious leaders, the Pharisees, went to Pilate and asked for a guard to be placed at the sepulchre because they were afraid of what he said, that he would rise in 3 days. And they were afraid that his disciples would come and steal the body away, and that would cause more trouble than what they've already done. So Pilate granted the guards to stand watch over him. Another gospel says that a great sleep fell upon those guards as the stone was rolled away. He says, and she runneth to them, and then Peter therefore went forth, and the other disciple, and came to the sepulchre. So they ran both together, and the other disciple did outrun Peter. So John must have been a little bit faster than Peter, and came first to the sepulchre. And he stooped down and looked in and saw the linen clothes lying, yet went he not in. I can understand that, not wanting to go in, but peeked in. But now, old Peter, he's not like that, was he? Peter was the bold one. Then cometh Simon Peter, following him, and went into the sepulchre, and seeth the linen cloths lying, and the napkin that was about his face, not lying with the linen cloths, but wrapped together in the place of itself. Now, in another of the Gospels, it said that the linen cloth was folded neatly and lying off to the side. Now, there is a reason for that. And I believe I've told you this in the past. There's a reasoning why a linen cloth would be folded neatly. When they would be invited to a wedding feast or whatever the feast was, they lasted usually for several days. And so if when you was going home in the evening, if you was planning on returning the next day, they would take the linen cloth, which was your napkin, and they would fold it neatly, and you would lay it over your plate. So the next day when you come back, you'd have your cloth, and you would, unfold it and lay it in their lap or whatever they did with it, and then they were ready to eat. Now, if you was done eating and you was not going to be coming back, they would wad it up and lay it and kind of throw it into the plate because it would be all messed and so they wasn't returning. And there's the reason why of that. When Jesus folded the linen cloth that laid over his face and laid it to the side, it's meant that what? He was returning. Now, we're still waiting for that return. But I believe that he is coming real soon. There's also a place in the Bible, and John has brought this up several times. People talk about the return of Jesus and the things, the signs that he gave us in Matthew chapter 4. He gave us a lot of the signs of his returning. And I believe a lot of those signs has happened. But there's one that I heard this preacher, or I don't know if he was a preacher or I don't know that he was preaching, but he was teaching. And he said there's one sign to pay very close attention to. And when you see it, folks, you had better get ready. And that is a great revival among the Jewish people. John brings this up quite often. It says in the Bible that they would all come to know him. And to know him, there's got to be a great revival that happens among the Jewish people. We don't see signs of it. We see some of it. And he was talking about it, that you're seeing signs of some of that happening. You're seeing a lot of the Jewish people that are very strict Jewish people that have starting to recognize Jesus as their Messiah. So, folks, if you start seeing a big revival, you hear the news or see of a great revival happening there, folks, we had better get ourselves ready. It says, then, when he also, that other disciple, which first came to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed. For as yet they know not the scripture that must rise again from the dead, that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away again unto their own homes. Now, what do you think? It's hard to me imagine that they went away to their own homes and just sat there. Folks, I would believe that if they remembered that he said that he must rise from the dead, they would probably be going back to shouting and a hooping and a hollering. Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah. No, they feared the Jews a lot.
They did fear the Jews. That's the thing. They were probably very still afraid. Hey, they just saw what had happened to their leader. I could imagine they would still be quite afraid of what might happen. But it said, but Mary stood without the sepulchre weeping. You know, maybe she didn't understand. Maybe she don't understand what's going on. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre. The guys that did it, they just went in, they come out, they're now here. She wanted to see what was going on. And seeth two angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus lay. Now, why didn't the men see him? It wasn't meant for them to see him.
You see, like you might be a little remorseful about not being able to find it, too.
Yeah, I think all of us has a role to play in the kingdom of God. We all have a job we do. And all of our jobs is not the same. Now, some of us has the same jobs, some of us don't. So I think that it wasn't their time to see the angels or to get the message. It was Mary's time. And when she looked in, she saw these angels. And they said unto her, Woman, why weepest thou? As John said, it seems that she must have been a little more sorrowful about, she was there she had followed Jesus, all the things that Jesus had did, cast out her demons, where she was a follower of Jesus and put all of her faith and trust in him, and now he's dead, and here she comes to take care of him. and his body is gone. She didn't know what they did with it. She saith unto him, because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they lay him. And when she was that had turned, thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing and knew not that it was Jesus. Why do you think they didn't know it was Jesus? What did the Old Testament say about the appearance of Jesus? What did he look like? He had no beauty about him, nothing that was desirous of men. I think he was probably a pretty common, ordinary looking man. Like most of us. We're just, so I find something here that Mary did not recognize who she was.
It doesn't seem like that he had any scars or anything from the thorns.
Not and not until he showed them to Thomas.
In his side, in his hands,
Mm-hmm.
right?
But he could have had his hands where they.
But I mean, as far as his appearance,
But think of that. There was also other times that they did not recognize who he was. When he was on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize who he was or didn't know who he was.
that was a matter of a day or two, wasn't it?
Yeah. What about the ones that stood in the boat fishing and he was on the seashore and they didn't recognize him?
Uh-oh.
See, I think there was times that Jesus probably didn't want them to recognize maybe right away. Or maybe Mary was just so sorrowful and in her eyes she was crying so much and maybe the light just wasn't come up enough that she didn't recognize him.
Probably a difference in the voice, maybe.
But Jesus said unto her, Woman, why weepest thou?
What happened when he said Mary that?
Whom seekest thou? She supposed him to be a gardener and said unto him, Sir, if thou have borne him hence, take me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. She thinking that he was a gardener, maybe one of them that moved the body of Jesus. Sir, take me to him, that I may do what needs to be done. And Jesus said unto her, Mary. She turned her head and saith unto him, Rabbi, which is to say, Master. Isn't that something? Now, this next section, I've read two different commentaries, and both of them said the same thing. And it's here, Jesus said unto her, Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father. Now, both of the commentaries that I read said that the Greek word here that was used for touch me not is not what we would think of as touch me not. What it means to is don't cling to me. Now, it says here, touch me not. We've always said, okay, I always think of him stepping back and saying, and not touch me, but the commentaries that I read that said if you take the Greek translation of this passage, that probably she did touch him and he was saying, don't cling to me. So I'll tell you just what it says and we'll go from there. For I have not ascended to my Father. Now, what do you think he means he hasn't ascended? He didn't go immediately back to the Father, did he? Different stories that I read, two different commentators did have two different opinions on this one. And I don't know which one to do. It's hard for me to figure it out. But I believe it says that he had not ascended. I have not ascended to my Father and to my God. I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God.
What about old Thomas? He said, reach into thy finger.
Those were taken at least a day or two apart.
Later, right.
And at that point, he had already went to the Father and came back.
Sure.
Then it says that Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples what she had seen, that she had seen the Lord and that he had spoken these things unto her. Isn't that something to think about? Can you imagine the message that they got? Now we'll end right there tonight and study this in this, not just with this one, but the other Gospels. And there's some details in some of them that's different, and maybe we'll look at some of that next time. We are actually getting very close to the Easter time. What I would like to do is for us to spend this time and thinking and seeing the activities and things that happen during the Easter time that we celebrate, dealing with this and seeing the things that's going on. Put ourselves in our minds, I guess ourselves, and as if we were there, and think about how would we react and maybe things that we see. And I like to do that from time to time. Put myself into the story.